once people see that you're making money, they see you as prey. Even though I'm a lawyer, I used to think that this was just a lawyer's way of trying to make money, scaring us into asset protection strategies. For most of us, when we're just starting out or we're making small investments, we don't think much of them. And yet, as our assets grow, those assets become at risk. I did a handshake deal with an employee who, behind the scenes, really hated me. It turns out that she had been stealing from me. I decided I would fire her immediately. Within a few weeks, I had a lawsuit sitting on my desk. She was suing me for wrongful termination. That was immediately $10,000 out of my pocket. The lawyer said to me, this is gonna cost you at least $50,000, if not more, in legal fees. I learned the lesson. Lawyers aren't just making this up to scare you. You've got to protect your assets. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing that we do is Dan Martell sent me an email that said it took him 15 years to write about a $3.6 billion exit of one of his early investments in a company called Intercom. And when he wrote it, it got me thinking about whether he made this one mistake that you're probably making as well if you're investing in businesses, if you're building your own business, if you're investing in real estate. Let's talk about that mistake right now. Dan Martell is the author of the book, Buy Back Your Time. We all know him. We all love him, his Martell Method, his podcast. And we know that he is very transparent about his investments and the decisions that he's making. And that's part of what we love about Dan. So when I got this email, I was very interested to read about his investment, how he held on to the investment for 15 years, even though he got lots of offers to sell along the way. And he would call the founder that he was investing in, Owen, and say, hey, are you selling? Are you continuing to build? And Owen would say, nope, I'm still building. And Dan said, okay, I'm staying in. And that paid off in a big way with this $3.6 billion exit. Congratulations, Dan. Congratulations, Owen, and Intercom, now Finn. What a great opportunity for everyone. I'm so glad to read about it. The thing that the email didn't mention is whose name was that investment in? Was that in Dan's name, or did he do something better with it? That's what we're going to be looking at. For most of us, when we're just starting out or we're making small investments, we don't think much of them, right? Because they're small or we're just starting out. And yet, as our assets grow, those assets become at risk. And even though I'm a lawyer, I used to think that this was just a lawyer's way of trying to make money, scaring us into asset protection strategies. And I thought they didn't really matter until I started making money and I saw what happens as a result. And the first thing I saw is that once people see that you're making money, they see you as prey. There are predators out there that are preying on people who make money. And so as you start to make money, you want to protect your assets in such a way that if a predator comes after you in the form of a lawsuit or in the form of some sort of false accusation, that your assets are going to be protected in such a way that they're not going to want to come after you because your assets would actually be hard to get at. Another way that that happens is once you start employing people. I used to think, no way, I'm only going to employ people that I love to work with and that I trust. And I would enter into handshake deals with people all the time thinking, well, if I have to do a written contract, well, I'm not going to want to do business with that person. I only do handshake deals. Well, that lasted until I did a handshake deal with an employee who, it turns out, behind the scenes, really hated me. And this was one of the worst experiences of my life. We went into business together because I wanted to support her. She had a child. I knew I was going to be starting another business. I wanted to create a business with her that would allow her to earn income, even if I wasn't in the business that I was employing her in. So we start this business and we made a deal where if she didn't have a certain minimum income, I would cover it. She told me she wasn't making the minimum income. I said, okay, I'll cover it. Until one day I went into the office that she was working in and I saw her move something very quickly. And I thought, what was that all about? Later that day, after she left the office, I got into her computer to see what was going on there. Well, it turns out that she had been stealing from me, that she hated me. I was shocked to read everything that I found in her emails. It turns out she was getting paid from other clients that she was engaging and just telling me that she wasn't. Theft. And it was devastating. And before I could even think, I decided I would fire her immediately when she came in the next day, which I did. But she was 8 months pregnant. And her stepmother was a lawyer. So within a few weeks, I had a lawsuit sitting on my desk, and she was suing me for wrongful termination and all sorts of other things. The first thing that I needed to do was find out if I had insurance to cover it. I didn't. The next thing that I needed to do was hire a lawyer. That was immediately $10,000 out of my pocket. The next thing I needed to do was provide my lawyer with all of the legal agreements that I had with my friend, my business partner, my team member. Well, we were on a handshake deal. And the lawyer said to me, sorry, this is gonna cost you at least $50,000 in legal fees. You need to just settle this, even if you think you're in the right. So 5 figures, maybe it was even a 6-figure settlement later, I was out of pocket. And luckily that was 15, 16, 17 years ago. I learned the lesson though, that lawyers aren't just making this up in order to scare you. You've got to protect your assets. We can have a whole nother episode on insurance and legal agreements. This one is about the asset protection that you can put in place to protect what you have now, even before it's worth anything. So that as that asset is growing, it's growing outside of your estate. Because if Dan made a $25,000 or $50,000 investment in Intercom, that investment would have grown to nearly $1.8 million, very likely based on the numbers that I've calculated, in this cash out. And if that investment was growing outside of his estate, it would be totally protected from creditors, so that if anybody were ever to come after him for anything, an employee, or if one of his children is driving a car and gets into an accident and it's not covered by insurance, that asset would be totally protected. And he can do it in a way where, and you can do it in a way where you're still able to control the asset even though it's fully protected. That's the important feature of the kind of trust that I recommend that you set up. Asset protection from predators or creditors or lawsuits is just one aspect. There's also an asset protection piece from taxes. And one of the biggest taxes here in the United States is estate taxes. And you might think, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I don't have $15 million, because right now, today, you could have up to $15 million without any estate tax impact when you die. But that number is going to change based on the administration that's in office. When I first started practicing law, it was only $675,000, and that's federal. There's also state estate taxes depending on what state you live in. So what you can do with your asset, because we don't know what the estate tax exemption will be when you die, we don't know what you'll own when you die, and we don't know what the estate tax rate will be when you die. Today it's about 40%, meaning that if you are over the estate tax exemption amount, your family is going to pay 40% to the government. That number has been as high as 77%. And again, we don't know what it's going to be when you die. So if Dan lived in the US, which he doesn't, he lives in Canada, and if his $1.8 million was subject to estate taxes today, that would be a $700,000 estate tax hit at his death. But if he'd taken that investment, that $25,000 or $50,000, and instead of making it in his own name, had made it in the name of an irrevocable trust that I call a steward's trust, it would grow in value from that $25,000 or $50,000 to $1.8 million, completely free of risk from estate taxes, not just at his death, but for many generations to come. And even better, now whoever is stewarding that trust, whether it's him during his lifetime or his kids during their lifetimes, they're actually incentivized to grow those assets, to learn how to steward those assets in a way that they're able to grow and multiply and not be at risk of creditors, predators, lawsuits, divorce, or estate taxes. So let's talk for a moment about the kind of trust I'm talking about. I call it a steward's trust, which is an irrevocable trust versus a revocable trust. A revocable trust you can set up during your lifetime, and you should, to keep your assets out of court at the time of your death or in the event of your incapacity, but it's revocable during your lifetime, meaning that it is completely subject to estate taxes, it is completely at risk of lawsuits, creditors, predators, divorce, because it's still your asset. It's a revocable trust, meaning you can take back the asset at any time. There's no protection other than for incapacity or death, which is huge protection, but not from lawsuits, predators, creditors, or divorce, or bankruptcy. But with an irrevocable trust, you've given the asset away. Well, you might say, I don't want to give my assets away. I want to be able to use my assets. I want to be able to invest my assets. I want to be able to grow my assets. And that's why if you're going to use an irrevocable trust, you want to set that trust up so that you can still have control over the assets and use over the assets, but the control is limited in such a way that the assets are still protected. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing that we do is we have an independent trustee who has full discretion, meaning they get to decide whether or not to make any distributions from that trust or not. You might say, well, I don't want some independent person deciding whether I get distributions from my trust, but yes, you do, because that's what provides the protection. And you don't want distributions from the trust. You want to do everything inside of the trust because you want all of the asset value to grow inside of the trust. So if you want to buy a house, the trust buys the house. If you want to invest in a business, the trust invests in the business. So everything happens inside of the trust. And you do have a measure of control if the trust is drafted in the right way, which is that you as the beneficiary would have the right to remove and replace the independent trustee with another independent trustee. So that's your control. You can always fire the independent trustee and say, I don't like how you're choosing to make distributions or not. I'm going to remove or replace you. Now, the other thing is that you want to make sure that you are named as the investment trustee. You're the one who decides how the investments are made, not a financial advisor, not a trustee, not a friend, not your parent, You're the one that's in control of how those investments are made, and that's what allows you to still invest those trust assets for growth. And you want to build in, and this is what we do in our Stewards Trust, we build in a provision that if as soon as an investment trustee steps into that role, when they're young, maybe they're 25 years old, 30 years old, if their parent is creating this for them now, if you're creating this for your kids now, you actually want to name them as a co-trustee with another trustee and give them a training period. Now, this trust starts to become an educational tool where the beneficiary of the trust, the investment trustee, is getting trained on how to make eyes wide open investment decisions and engage with these trust assets in a really good way. And so, yes, it's irrevocable. That's what makes it protected. But when the trust is drafted with the right terms and in the right way, there's going to be a lot of educational opportunities, a lot of investment opportunities, but a lot of protection from lawsuits, creditors, predators, divorce, and estate taxes. Well, if you've made it this far in the video, it's because you really care about what you're building. Even if it's really tiny right now, you believe it's going to build into something big, or you might have already built something big and you want to protect what you have. So the right next step for you is to register for my next live masterclass. I'm going to link to that here in the show notes. So look for that, get on that masterclass, because on that masterclass, I'm going to lay out for you in detail how to find the right person to support you to create a steward's trust just like this. If you go to any old lawyer, what's going to happen is they probably won't even know what a steward's trust is, or they may put in place an irrevocable trust for you that isn't going to meet the criteria and characteristics that we've talked about today. Maybe it won't really keep the assets out of your estate, or maybe it will have controls that are way too tight that you don't want your loved ones to get stuck with, and you may not understand all of the details. That's why I lay it out in detail on my masterclass, how to become your own best advisor when it comes to these matters, what to look for, how to hire the right support, what you can do yourself, and what you need to pay somebody to do for you, and how to look at what you already have in place to decide if what you already have is going to work. So I'll go over that in detail on my next masterclass. Go ahead and find the link in the show notes, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. By the way, this is not specific legal, insurance, financial, or tax advice for you. You'd know if it was, because you'd be paying me, and I'd be looking at your specific situation. So this is not that. This is for educational and informational purposes only. I strongly recommend that you talk with your own legal professional and that you attend my masterclass before you hire one to make sure that what you're getting is actually going to work for you and your family when they need it, because there's a lot of lawyers out there who are just putting in place legal documents that are ultimately going to fail when it's too late. So I'll cover all of that on the masterclass. If you've loved this, please subscribe, like, share, follow, do all the things so that you get notified about my next video or podcast, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.